In 2016, Ducati introduced the Multistrada Enduro, a 1200cc version of the already very good Multistrada road bike, but with more and added go-anywhere pretension. We rode the bike in Wales a couple of years ago, cut to me now wobbling around on a big white bike. The thing was massive, 30-litre tank, 19-inch front wheel, sump guard, loads of off-road tools. It was packed full of the kind of software that guys like me need to be able to get on off-road. But unfortunately for the majority of the target market, it was packed with so much stuff that it was too big. So what Ducati has done is gone down the less is more principle for this all-new 2019 1260 variant of the Multistrada Enduro. So what does less is more mean? Well, what Ducati has done is reduce the seat height by 10mm. It's down to 860 as the standard version. You can get an 840 if you're even shorter in the leg and still want a ginormous bike, which it still is. 10mm lower at the pegs. They've shaved a centimetre of rubber out of the foot pegs to just help you find the floor a little bit easier when you're taking your feet off the pegs. And also the bars are 30mm lower than the 1200 Multi-Enduro. So it's not only the ergonomics that have been reduced, they've also taken 15mm of travel out of both the fork and the shock. That doesn't make it any harder to do anything that you would want to do with this bike off-road. It just makes the thing a little less imposing on the side stand and a bit easier to get off and on. So with all the weight saving that Ducati has done, and it's not a huge amount, they've managed to trim the ready-to-ride weight down, all up with fuel, to 254 kilos. Yes, that is a huge amount. It is an incredibly heavy bike, but at the same time, it does have the ability to ride pretty much anywhere. And I know there are stacks of people out there in YouTube land, for instance, who have something to say about whether a bike is any good or not off-road based on how much it weighs. I actually picked up my phone and texted everybody's old mate Charlie Borman with the question of how fat is too fat when it comes to riding off-road. His round-the-world BMW that he rode with that guy out of Star Wars years ago was 300 kilos plus when he left London, and he seemed to do a pretty good job rattling down the road of bones in Russia in the snow, having loads of fun. So just to answer that question, I don't think there is a minimum weight limit or a maximum weight limit when you want to ride a bike off-road. There isn't anybody waiting with a set of scales who's going to weigh your bike and say, oh no, too heavy, go home. It doesn't exist. You can either ride off-road or you can't. This bike can definitely ride off-road. How do I know? Well, I finally got to take up Beppe Guellini's offer of a trip out to Florence to the DRE.
I wait you in Italy for the Enduro in Ipozzano.
You heard that? Picture Wales, but beautiful. Picture a grey sky but blue and with this funny yellow ball in the sky. We went off and rode 80 kilometres off-road before we took any pictures. A proper off-road test for any bike, let alone a 250 kilogram Panigale on stilts. So you can spec your 1260 Enduro with one of two Pirelli Scorpion tyres. The off-road version is the Rally, the big knobbly one that we tried in the morning on the off-road section. In the afternoon, we jumped on the Pirelli Scorpion Trail, the road-ready rubber. Ducati has worked on the design of those spoked rims. They do look trick as you like, they are tubeless, and in the off-road section, the Rally tyres that the bike came on made absolute mincemeat of what we were doing. But it is worth noting that within about 15 or 20 minutes of leaving our base, this beautiful castle, one of the other riders had already smashed the front wheel off a big rock and suffered a puncture. Something to consider if you are genuinely planning on buggering off into the middle of nowhere on your own on one of these bikes. So as with most Ducatis that you can buy now, there is a stack of rider modes to choose from, and with Multi-Enduro it made sense to go in the off-road mode. Now in off-road mode, with the engine setting on low, we're capped at 100 horsepower and you get stacks of assistance, loads of ABS, loads of traction control, and it feels like a very easy bike to just basically sit on and look like you know what you're doing. I quite quickly realised that I wanted a little bit more spin at the back and maybe would have liked a little bit more power to just see me up some of the steeper and more difficult to ride sections of our off-road loop. So I had the medium map and I was in off-road mode. So there I was, 255 kilos, having loads of fun in the middle of Florence in the sunshine. So one thing on that, riding off-road in the middle of nowhere in Florence, if you're expecting beautiful drone shots and lots of ride-bys in the off-road sections, you're not going to see them. Most of our off-road footage is chest or helmet mounted because we just couldn't get a cameraman where we went on these bikes. So one of the other tweaks that Ducati has made to this new bike is shortening the overall gearing and shortening first gear in particular. So not only have they added about 17% more torque at 5,500 revs over the 1200 version of this bike, but also they've made that torque easier to get at, particularly when you're off-road, by making first gear a little bit shorter and more suitable to punching your way over gravelly kind of beautiful Italian hillsides or just bouncing up the curb outside your garage. So one of the better things about this bike for me when I was off-road was knowing that there was all of those rider aids there to take care of me. So the Bosch 6-axis IMU offers witchcraft levels of on-road ability. We'll get to that when we come to it. Cornering ABS, all that weird stuff. But it also works off-road in as much as the wheel speed sensors picking up on what the back wheel's doing, allowing you that spin when you need it. The ABS mode allowing me to skid the back wheel when I need it, but still having ABS at the front. It makes off-road riding as easy as possible. Off-road section finished, into our private castle, had a lovely lunch, and came out ready to ride the roads for the afternoon. The big differences in the afternoon was the bike was fitted with trail tyres, had huge panniers, and it had a shorter screen. It's kind of the road-going setup for Multistrada Enduro. One thing that's interesting and worth noting is we made absolutely no changes to the suspension. It's got the SAC semi-active suspension system on it, so you literally can boing your way off-road from a motorway, and the suspension is making adjustments as it goes, and it can cope with wherever you want to ride. Ridiculously, within that, there are over 400 parameters that you can play with to help set this system up to suit you perfectly. But if you just left it alone, trust that you can go anywhere on it, and this weird semi-active thing will do everything for you. There are a host of other adjustable bits and pieces that this bike comes with. All of it visible through this very easy to read kind of 5-inch TFT screen. It looks trick as you like, and it's also a lot easier than old Ducati systems to navigate through with a little joystick down here on the left-hand side of the bars. That's me adjusting stuff, by the way. Look, I'm adjusting. Funny old thing, the bike is incredibly capable on road. It's a Ducati. It's not going to be rubbish on road at all, is it? But let's not forget again, that weight, 250 odd kilos, and the fact that it's got a 19-inch front wheel. It is a big front wheel, regardless of what tyre you put on it. It feels a little bit lazy if you're jumping from like a sports naked or even a sports bike. Things do take a little bit of adjusting. You do have to get your head around the idea that you've got loads of leverage through those big wide bars, but also you're pushing and pulling a slightly bigger front wheel than normal around. It was on the road for me that all of the tech that this bike has really came to life. That cornering ABS, cornering lights, seamless quick shifter up and down the gearbox, hill hold control, anti-wheelie control, everything control. It's just got loads and loads of tech on it. But I didn't ever really feel like it was intrusive. Not once did the ABS cut in too early. It was only when I was dicking around that the traction control and anti-wheelie got in the way. You can ride this bike much quicker than you think based on looks alone, and also when you are trying to ride it fast, it's quite good fun knowing that you can get away with a lot, knowing that all these little safety nets are surrounding you and keeping you safe. So one thing I did find on the way down that kind of clutchless downshift assist gearbox was that from third to second on the brakes, every now and then the bike would jump out of gear on the way into corners. Firstly, it's important to note that this was my first day on a bike, and it takes time for you to adjust to the shift of any bike. Secondly, these are the first run of production for Ducati, and I'm sure, as they reassured me, by the time it gets to the stage that you buy yours off the showroom floor, everything will be fine. Such a punchy and urgent motor. It was great fun getting hold of it and being able to use torque or power anywhere in the rev range in any one of the gears that I was in. The motor has come from ex-DRL, and it's also the one that we'll see in next year's DRL. 1260 DVT. There's lots to talk about in terms of how good it is, but one of the key points that the guys at Ducati wanted to make to me, and one that they really wanted to celebrate, was the service cycle interval. Again, there's this notion that Ducatis are clunky old ditch pumps that break whenever they can, and they chuck belts everywhere. That's not quite the case with them anymore. If you're not aware, the service cycles are 9,000 and 18,000 miles. So 9,000 for a minor service, 18,000 for the valve clearances and a major service. Chances are, and Ducati are fully aware of the fact, that these bikes will possibly make their way to their second or third owner before they'll even need that first 18,000 mile service. So even with the adjustable screen in this bike on the lowest setting, there was this slightly cosseted feeling that I got once I was in the bike. There's bits of it all the way around you. It doesn't feel big. Well, it does feel big, but it doesn't feel big. What I'm trying to say is, despite all of that size, it is a fun bike to ride. It does enjoy being thrown around. Those Brembo brakes, monoblock M432s, are ridiculously good. It just does everything that you want a big tall bike to do, probably better than you think it should. So at the end of a sweet day on the bike, off-road and on, I was left with two questions. The first one is, would I own one? Well, I can answer that straight away by saying I can't afford it myself. It's 17,755 quid for the base model, all the way up to 19,800 and something for the all-singing, all-dancing, full touring spec version. I'd choose my non-existent bike that I can't afford in the desert cam colour rather than the red. And the last question I had to ask myself is, how much does it cost to repair one of these things when you drop them? I spoke to Beppe, the guy that runs DRE Italy, the guy that does all of the off-road training with Ducati, and surprisingly enough, he said it's the simple stuff that you would break on any bike if they fall over. So you're going to do a clutch lever, you might do a gear lever, you might do an indicator. But the shape of these bikes and the profile that they have on either side means that unless you absolutely barrel roll the thing and smash it to a million pieces, you're only really going to nick the edges off the normal stuff that you would have to replace with everything else. So if you're in the market for a super adventure bike, it's almost irrelevant what the guys from BMW and KTM are doing with theirs. It's largely irrelevant how expensive they are. They're all quite expensive bikes to buy. If you're a Ducati fan at heart, this is going to be the bike for you. Not only will it justify its fairly hefty price tag, it's a true adventure bike in every sense, but Ducati have just managed to do that one thing that they seem to do better than all the others, and that's being able to do these things in style.